Well, welcome back.
Welcome back, family. I'm Renee,
I am Kyrie.
and welcome to Hear Us Out. And again, as always, I want to say thank you to all of our subscribers, and thank you to new listeners who are
Hmm.
here, um, hearing us out.
Thank you for hearing us out. And
Yeah.
in the last two episodes, we've been
Mm-hmm.
discussing Dune, and particularly the first
Part.
part of Dune,
Mm-hmm.
which is called Dune.
Doom. Right.
And like I said, we've been painting in very broad strokes, just going over I think, some of the most prevalent points
Mm-hmm.
in the overall themes of the story as a whole.
Right.
And the first part was really about recognition,
Yeah.
recognizing where the danger
Mm-hmm.
is, especially since they're in such a dangerous situation. And the second part was really about understanding how unprepared they are for these things.
Right. And how these moments, these episodes can make you and unmake you.
Yeah.
That these particular type of moments, the testing of whether or not you can decipher being a human,
Mm-hmm.
those type of things also came up as well. And so, in our judgments, how it is that we make particular judgments, even in the face of adversity, I guess
Mm-hmm.
is one of the
Yeah.
elements as well. That
It's
was,
a lot of little moving pieces
mm-hmm,
that are all a part of this overarching story of just recognizing how the nature of this trap, the
mm-hmm,
trap that they find themselves in, is um, very pernicious.
okay,
In that it costs them a lot,
mm-hmm, okay,
and it feels like they can't do anything about it. And if you read the story, you know that there is really nothing they
that can
can do
do,
about it.
mm-hmm,
But the trap, the real trap, isn't
that they're
the
in the
war
box, right,
between
mm-hmm,
it isn't the war
mm-hmm,
between the Harkonnens and the Atreides.
right,
It's not, that's something of a microcosm of the
mm-hmm,
greater
right,
trap that they find themselves
mm-hmm,
in. And in this particular part, in
right.
the final chapter, the one I've been hyping up over these last few
Right.
episodes, you really begin to understand that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I like to talk about like my personal journey with Dune and how it came at a very pivotal moment in my life, and it was this chapter in particular.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the points made here and the
Mm-hmm.
things that Paul goes through in this particular chapter, where it all
Right.
coalesced
It
into
all
like,
encapsulates right here.
and
Right.
Dune went from being, man, this book is really good,
Uh-huh.
to being like, this is the best thing that I might have ever read in my life.
Okay.
You know, just because. Let me just get into it,
Right. Let's
because
get
I could
into
talk
it.
about it all day.
Right.
Let me just get into it.
Let's get into it.
And now, so let me paint the picture here. Like I said, in broad strokes, it's kind of jumping around. This is the last chapter, the first part, and the trap has been snared. It's went off, and the Harkonnens have are currently winning. The Duke
Yeah.
Leto
Yeah.
has been killed.
Mm-hmm.
He is dead, and Jessica and Paul are on the run. There was, like I said, a traitor in their midst.
Mm-hmm.
In this, you learn that it is Dr. Yue,
Yes. Right.
the Sook doctor, who's been conditioned,
Mm-hmm.
like all Sook doctors,
Mm-hmm.
to bring no harm to anyone.
Right.
So that's why he was never really suspected. Not to mention that he has a burning hatred for the Harkonnens, like everyone in the Duke's employ. But the Harkonnens, in particular, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, the head of House Harkonnen, was able to subvert Dr. Yue's conditioning, by dangling the possibility of
Mm-hmm.
his wife's life in front of him. And he just could not. He needed to know for a fact if his wife was alive or if his wife was dead.
Right.
And it pushed him to such an extent that he betrayed his house, but he also ensured, Jessica and Paul's escape. That we see later
Right.
on in this chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're now on the run. They're in the desert, in this steel tent, that is, meant to keep out all of the pressures, of the desert. and they're waiting for another attendant of House Atreides, Duncan Idaho, who's an ambassador to the Freeman. They're waiting for him to come back, right? And in the midst of all of this, Paul is going through a very personal journey
Mm-hmm.
that really encapsulates, his entire being on this planet. Right. So that's the scene.
Mm-hmm. That's where
All
we
right.
are.
So let's begin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Get started. Paul felt that all his past, every experience before this night, had become sand curling in an hourglass. He sat near his mother, hugging his knees within a small fabric and plastic hut, a steel tent that had come like the Freeman clothing they now wore from the pack left in the Thopter. There was no doubt in Paul's mind who had put the Firmkit there, who had directed the course of the Thopter carrying them captive. Yue. The traitor doctor had sent them directly into the hands of Duncan Idaho. Paul stared out the transparent end of the steel tent at the moon-shadowed rocks that ringed this place where Idaho had hidden them. Hiding like a child when I'm now the Duke, Paul thought. He felt the thought gall him, but he could not deny the wisdom in what they did. Something had happened to his awareness this night. He saw with sharpened clarity every circumstance and occurrence around him. He felt unable to stop the inflow of data and the cold precision with which each new item was added to his knowledge, and the computation was centered in his awareness. It was meant to have power and more. Paul thought back to the moment of impotent rage as the strange doctor dived out of the night onto them, stooping like a giant hawk above the desert with the wind screaming through its wings. The thing in Paul's mind had happened then. The doctor had skidded and slewed across the sand ridge toward the running figures, his mother and himself. Paul remembered how the smell of burned sulfur from abrasions of Thopter skids against sand had drifted across them. His mother, he knew, had turned, expecting to meet a laser gun in the hands of Harkonnen mercenaries, and had recognized Duncan Idaho leaning out of the Thopter's open doors shouting, "Hurry, there's worm signs south of you." But Paul had known as he turned who piloted the Thopter. An accumulation of minutiae in the ways it was flown, the dash of the landing, clues so small even his mother had detected them, had told Paul precisely who sat at the controls. Across the steel tent from Paul, Jessica stirred, said, "There could be only one explanation. The Harkonnens held you his wife. He hated the Harkonnens. I cannot be wrong about that. You read his note. But why has he saved us from the carnage?" She is only now seeing it, and that poorly, Paul thought. The thought was a shock. He had known this fact as a by-the-way thing, while reading the note that had accompanied the ducal signet in the pack. "Do not try to forgive me," Yue had written. "I do not want your forgiveness. I already have enough burdens. What I have done was done without malice or hope of another's understanding. It is my own Tahadi al-Bahan, my ultimate test. I give you the Atreides ducal signet as token that I write truly. By the time you read this, Duke Leto will be dead. Take consolation from my assurance that he did not die alone. That one we hate above all others died with him." Mm. It had not been addressed or signed, but there had been no mistaking the familiar scrawl, Yue's. Remembering the letter, Paul re-experienced the distress of that moment, a thing sharp and strange that seemed to happen outside his new mental alertness. He had read that his father was dead, known the truth of the words, but had felt them as no more than another datum to be entered in his mind and used. I loved my father, Paul thought, and he knew this for truth. I should mourn him. I should feel something. But he felt nothing except, here's an important fact. It was one with all the other facts. All the while his mind was adding sense impressions, extrapolating, computing. Halleck's words came back to Paul. Mood's a thing for cattle or for love-making. You fight when the necessity arises, no matter your mood. Perhaps that's it, Paul thought. I'll mourn my father later, when there's time.
Mm-hmm.
Stop here 1st.
Mm-hmm.
That now we begin to see Paul's personal
Right.
battle being
Mm-hmm.
taken in. His awareness is expanding extremely fast. Maybe, it's the circumstances they find themselves in. It's all the danger that has heightened his
Mm-hmm.
senses, to this extent. Maybe it's something else. We don't really know right now. But he knows for a fact that he has outpaced his mother, whom is, a Bene Gesserit, as we've discussed before, who is trained extensively in the art of observation, you know, but he's outpaced her. He's miles ahead of even the Mentats
Mm-hmm.
and the Reverend Mothers, you know, but it is awkward for him being in his position because it's not allowing him to be in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
to feel the things that he knows he ought to be feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he just got news that his
Father,
father
right,
is dead.
dead. Mm-hmm.
His father that he knows that he loved,
Mm-hmm.
that he knows that he respected and cherished, but for some reason he cannot mourn. And he thinks it's because there is still danger. They are still in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
So his body is not allowing himself to have this moment. But it is, the absence of that is driving this internal conflict, this distress that he finds himself in, you know. And I often talk about how I hate this world because of the compromises
Mm-hmm.
that it forces upon you. You know, there's just so much. I don't have no any other way to say it, but it's just so much violence
Mm-hmm.
and just so much death. It's hard to keep up with, and you have to just ignore it to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And it I hate that
Mm-hmm.
because like I'm never prepared, you know, for these things,
Right.
right? I just remember like particular moments, in my life when you're, confronted with this violence,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's like now I'm supposed to just keep going.
Right.
I'm supposed to just keep moving, keep like this thing
Did not
did
happen.
not just happen,
Right.
you know, and everyone else just keeps moving, and but my
Mm-hmm.
mind keeps drifting back to those moments.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what this world asks of you,
Right.
you know, that we live in a world where such where you often find yourself in this distress when you know you should be mourning, when you know you should be hurt,
Mm-hmm.
but you cannot allow yourself to have that moment.
Right.
The world cannot give you that
Mm-hmm.
moment, you know, because if you do, then that's all you're doing. How much pain is there just wrapped up in this compromise that you've made with yourself and everything around you
Mm-hmm.
to just not let yourself have that moment, to not let it affect you, not let it get to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps happening, it keeps on going. And you think that, this is just what you have to do. And it is,
Yeah.
to exist in this. And, and I hate that. I often like the compromise, the
Mm-hmm.
things that this world asks of you to just be comfortable with, to just accept
Mm-hmm.
that are, for all intents and purposes,
Unacceptable.
unacceptable,
Mm-hmm.
but we keep going anyway, you know? So, like I said, I this part
Mm-hmm.
really encapsulates a lot for me. And just that distress that Paul finds himself in, is a distress that, I think a lot of us find ourselves in at moments, but especially, I can't really speak for anyone else other than me in this moment, and just feeling like I should break down here.
Mm-hmm.
I should cry
Mm-hmm.
here. I should feel something outside of this just happened and I need to keep going,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But you can't, not
Mm-hmm.
until you get
Can.
to that
Right. That's
place,
right. Not until you
not until
can.
you can.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to see just how Paul is able to reach that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But he felt no let up in the core precision of his being. He sensed that his new awareness was only a beginning, that it was growing. The sense of terrible purpose he'd first experienced in his ordeal with the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen pervaded him. His right hand, the hand of remembered pain, tingled and throbbed.
Mm-hmm.
Is this what it is to be the Kuzes Haderach? He wondered. For a while I thought Howard had failed us again, Jessica said. I thought perhaps Yui wasn't a soup doctor. He was everything we thought him, and more, Paul said. And he thought, why is he so slow? Seeing these things, he said. If Idaho doesn't get through to Kynes, Willoughby, he's our only hope, she said. Such was not my suggestion, he said. She heard the steel in his voice, the sense of command, and stared across the grey darkness of the Stilton at him. Paul was a silhouette against moon-frosted rocks, seen through the tent's transparent end. Others among your father's men will have escaped, she said. We must regather them. Find, we will depend upon ourselves, he said. Our immediate concern is our family atomics. We must get them before the Harkonnens can search them out. Now, just to paint the picture here, when he says family atomics, all of the great houses
Mm-hmm.
have nuclear weapons, but they don't use
Use
them
them. Right.
because there's something of a agreement,
Mm-hmm.
something of an unspoken agreement that that you won't use these things, and if you do use your family atomics, then every other house
Right.
has carte blanche to use
Use.
their atomics on you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's mutual assured,
Right.
you know,
Understanding.
mutual. It's kind of like the Cold War moment, like
Mm-hmm.
mutual destruction.
Mm-hmm.
That if you use yours, we'll use ours, and no one survives.
Right.
So
Yes.
so all of the families have these weapons at their disposal,
Mm-hmm.
but no one uses them because they know if they do, then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the period on the end of this whole civilization.
Right.
We go no further than it.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So yeah, not likely they'll be found, she said. The way they were hidden, it must not be left to chance. And she thought, blackmail with the family atomics as a threat to the planet and its spice. That's what he has in mind. But all he can hope for then is escape into renegade anonymity. His mother's words had provoked another train of thought in Paul. Excuse me. A deuce concern for all the people they lost this night. People are the true strength of a great house, Paul thought, and he remembered Howard's words. Parting with people is a sadness. A place is only a place. They're using Sardaukar, Jessica said. We must wait until the Sardaukar have been withdrawn. Once again, let me explain.
Mm-hmm.
The Sardaukar are the Emperor's imperial legions, the greatest warriors in the entire Imperium. You know, and the fact that Sardaukar are here just, confirms the conspiracy with the Harkonnens and that the Emperor is, helping
Mm-hmm.
in the downfall of the Atreides. So when you hear Sardaukar, think ultimate
Yeah.
warrior.
Ultimate warriors. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We continue. Mm. They think us caught between the desert and the Sardaukar, Paul said. They intend that there be no Atreides survivors. Total extermination. Do not count on any of our people escaping. They cannot go on indefinitely, risking exposure of the Emperor's part in this. Can't they? Some of our people are bound to escape. Are they? Jessica turned away, frightened of the bitter strength in her son's voice, hearing the precise assessment of chances. She sensed that his mind had leaped ahead of her, that it now saw more in some respects than she did. She had helped train the intelligence which did this, but now she found herself fearful of it. Her thoughts turned, seeking toward the lost sanctuary of her Duke, and tears burned her eyes. This is the way it had to be, Leto, she thought. A time of love and a time of grief. She rested her hand on her abdomen, awareness focused on the embryo there. I have the Atreides daughter I was ordered to produce, but the Reverend Mother was wrong. A daughter wouldn't have saved my Leto. This child is only life reaching for the future in the midst of death. I conceived out of instinct and not out of obedience. Try the communet receiver again, Paul said. The mind goes on working no matter how we try to hold it back, she thought. Jessica found the tiny receiver Idaho had left for them, flipped its switch, a green light glowed on the instrument's face, tiny screeching came from its speaker. She reduced the volume, hunted across the bands. A voice speaking Atreides battle language came into the tent. Back and regroup at the ridge. Fedor reports no survivors in Karthik, and the guild bank has been sacked. Karthik, Jessica thought. That was a Harkonnen hotbed. There's a Sardaukar, the voice said. Watch out for Sardaukar in Atreides uniforms. There, a roaring filled the speaker. Then silence. Try the other bands, Paul said. Do you realize what that means? Jessica asked. I expected it. They want the guild to blame us for destruction of their bank. With the guild against us, we're trapped on Arrakis. Try the other bands. She weighed his words. I expected it. What had happened to him? Slowly, Jessica returned to the instrument. As she moved the band slide, they caught glimpses of violence and the few voices calling out in Atreides battle language. Fall back. Try to regroup, Rat. Trapped in the cave, Rat. There was no mistaking the victorious exultation in the Harkonnen gibberish that poured from the other bands. Sharp commands. Battle reports. There wasn't enough of it for Jessica to register and break the language, but the tone was obvious. Harkonnen victory. Paul shook the pack beside him, hearing the 2 liter johns of water gurgle there. He took a deep breath, looked up through the transparent end of the tent at the rock escarpment outlined against the stars. His left hand felt the sphincter seal of the tent's entrance. It'll be dawn soon, he said. We can wait through the day for Idaho, but not through another night. In the desert, you must travel by night and rest in shade through the day. Remembered lore insinuated itself into Jessica's mind. Without a steel suit, a man sitting in shade on the desert needs 5 liters of water a day to maintain body weight. She felt the slick, soft skin of the steel suit against her body, thinking how their lives depended on these garments. If we leave here, Idaho can't find us, she said. There are ways to make any man talk, he said. If Idaho has to return by dawn, we must consider the possibility he has been captured. How long do you think he could hold out? The question required no answer, and she sat in silence. Paul lifted the seal on the pack, pulled out a tiny manual with a glow tab and magnifier. Green and orange letters leaped out at him through the pages. Little John, steel tent, energy caps, recaps, sand snorks, binoculars, steel suit rep kit, bar dye pistol, sync chart, filt plugs, paracompass, maker hooks, thumpers, firm kit, fire pillar. So many things for survival on the desert. Presently he put the manual aside on the tent floor. Where can we possibly go? Jessica asked. My father spoke of desert power, Paul said. The Harkonnens cannot rule this planet without it. They never ruled this planet, nor shall they. Not even with 10,000 legions of Sadorkar. Paul, you can't think that. We've all the evidence in our hands, he said. Right here in this tent. The tent itself. This pack and its contents, these steel suits. We know the Guild wants a prohibitive price for weather satellites. We know that. What have weather satellites to do with it? She asked. They couldn't possibly, she broke off. Paul sensed the hyper-alertness of his mind reading her reactions, computing on minutiae. You see it now, he said. Satellites watch the terrain below. There are things in the deep desert that would not bear frequent inspection. You're suggesting the Guild itself controls this planet? She was so slow. No, he said. The freemen. They're paying the Guild for privacy, paying in a coin that's freely available to anyone with desert power. Spice. This is more than a second approximation answer. It's a straight line computation. Depend on it. Paul, Jessica said, you're not a mentat yet. You can't know for sure you'll... I'll never be a mentat, he said. I'm something else. A freak. Paul, how can you say such? Leave me alone. He turned away from her, looking out into the night. Why can't I mourn, he wondered. He felt that every fiber of his being craved this release, but it would be denied him forever. Jessica had never heard such distress in the son's voice. She wanted to reach out to him, hold him, comfort him, help him, but she sensed there was nothing she could do. He had to solve this problem by himself. The glow tab of the firmkit manual between them now on the tent floor caught her eye. She lifted it, glanced at the fly-leaf reading, Manual of the Friendly Desert, the place full of life. Here are the ayat and bahan of life. Believe, and Allah shall never burn you. It reads like the Azar book, she thought, recalling her studies of the great secrets. Has a manipulator of religion been on Arrakis? Paul lifted the paracompass from the pack, returned it, said, think of all these special application Freeman machines. They show unrivaled sophistication. Admit it. The culture that made these things betrays depths no one suspected. Hesitating, still worried by the harshness in his voice, Jessica returned to the book, studied an illustrated constellation from the Arrakeen sky, Muad'Dib, the mouse, and noted that the tail pointed north. Paul stared into the tense darkness at the dimly discerned movements of his mother revealed by the manual's glow tab. Now is the time to carry out my father's wish, he thought. I must give her his message now, while she has time for grief. Grief would inconvenience us later, and he found himself shocked by precise logic. Mother, he said. Yes? She heard the change in his voice, felt coldness in her entrails at the sound. Never had she heard such harsh control. My father is dead, he said. She searched within herself for the coupling of fact and fact and fact, a really guesswork way of assessing data, and it came to her, the sensation of terrifying loss. Jessica nodded, unable to speak. My father charged me once, Paul said, to give you a message if anything happened to him. He feared you might believe he distrusted you. That useless suspicion, she thought. He wanted you to know he never suspected you, Paul said, and explained his deception, adding, he wanted you to know he always trusted you completely. always loved you and cherished you. He said he would soon have mistrusted himself, and he had but one regret, that he never made you his duchess. She brushed the tears coursing down her cheeks, thought, what a stupid waste of the body's water. But she knew this thought for what it was, the attempt to retreat from grief into anger. Let him, let him, she thought. What terrible things we do to those we love. With a violent motion, she extinguished the little manual's glow tab. Sobs shook her. Paul heard his mother's grief and felt the emptiness within himself. I have no grief, he thought. Why? Why? He felt the inability to grieve as a terrible flaw. A time to get and a time to lose, Jessica thought, quoting to herself from the O.C. Bible. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time for love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. Paul's mind had gone on in its chilling precision. He saw the avenues ahead of them on this hostile planet without even the safety valve of dreaming. He focused his prescient awareness, seeing it as a computation of most probable futures, but with something more, an edge of mystery, as though his mind dipped into some timeless stratum and sampled the winds of the future. Abruptly, as though he found a necessary key, Paul's mind climbed another notch in awareness. He felt himself climbing to this new level, clutching it at a precarious hold and peering about. It was as though he existed within a globe with avenues radiating away in all directions. Yet this only approximated the sensation. He remembered once seeing a gauze kerchief blowing in the wind, and now he sensed the future as though it twisted across some surface as undulant and impermanent as that of the wind-blown kerchief. He saw people. He felt the heat and cold of uncounted probabilities. He knew names and places, experienced emotions without number, reviewed data of innumerable unexplored crannies. There was time to probe and test and taste, but no time to shape. The thing was a spectrum of possibilities, from the most remote past to the most remote future, from the most probable to the most improbable. He saw his own death in countless ways. He saw new planets, new cultures, people. People, he saw them in such swarms they could not be listed, and his mind catalogued them, even the guildsmen. And he thought, the guild, there'd be a way for us. My strangeness, accepted as a familiar thing of high value, always was an assured supply of the now necessary spice. But the idea of living out his life in the mind groping ahead through possible futures that guided hurtling spaceships appalled him. It was a way, though, and in meeting the possible future that contained guildsmen, he recognized his own strangeness. I have another kind of sight. I see another kind of terrain, the available paths. The awareness conveyed both reassurance and alarm. So many places on that other kind of terrain dipped or turned out of his sight. As swiftly as it had come, the sensation slipped away from him, and he realized the entire experience had taken the space of a heartbeat. Yet his own personal awareness had been turned over, illuminated in a terrifying way. He stared around him. I'm going to take another break here
Mm-hmm.
because, like this particular moment, I've never experienced being able to see the future of this
Right.
omniscient
It's right.
level of perspective,
Mhm.
you know. But there, I have experienced like the rush of understanding
Mhm.
when you see something that is so opaque, like you're never going to get it, and then that moment comes where it all just clicks into place, you know. And I guess you could call it something of a religious fervor, just that rush,
Mhm.
because this is kind of the thing that he's finding himself in, of things clicking into place, but it's outside of his control. It's doing it of its own. Just this understanding is pouring into him, you know. And there are like particular moments, like when I know that I don't know if this happens to everyone else, but I'm sure it happens to a lot of people, where you have a hard time catching up with yourself,
Mhm.
like when your mind comes to a conclusion before you ever do, and you don't really understand how you've gotten to that point, and you don't really get that point until you're able to catch up to it. And
Mhm.
then it all snaps into place. And you're like, I knew this before I knew it, you know? And there's just little things that pop out here and there,
Mhm.
little like, moments of dissonance where things just aren't clicking,
Right.
right? But you don't recognize it as dissonance in the moment. It's just, what it
Right.
is. You see that there are gaps, but you excuse them because, you think you know where you're going.
Mhm.
but you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and you know you don't know, but you're not fully aware of just what that is until it comes, from something, some
Mm-hmm.
decision, some word, some book, some phrase,
Mm-hmm.
someone or something does something
Right.
that allows you to catch up to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're fully aware of those gaps. And you see those things that you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And you begin to understand just how frail, how emaciated your preconceived notions of what things are truly are. It's all just so frivolous, in particular moments. It comes and goes. I remember, when I was a kid, I would like I think I told you about this one
Mm-hmm.
time. I used to get like out of body experiences,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
right? Like I would stare at the mirror and my reflection and just be like, that's my face. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not my
Mm-hmm.
face, right? It's a reflection
Turn
of
off
your
the face.
face.
Right.
It's your reflection over the x-axis, if I remember correctly. It's
Mm-hmm.
a reflection. It's
Mm-hmm.
not truly you,
Right.
but it's the closest approximation,
Nation. Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember just having that moment and just feeling like I was leaving myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was something there that I wasn't truly getting. I used to stare at my fingernails, right? And they were like, my fingernails are all like they were always so smooth and uniform.
Yeah.
And then I would think,
Yeah.
and
That's
I
so
would
long.
think,
Right.
yeah, and then I would think, do my fingernails look better than me? Right? It was just one of those
Right.
odd
With
kid
odd kids.
thoughts,
Right.
right? And you're just staring at them like, because they're just so like
Perfect. Right.
just
It's just so
uniform. They're
small.
just
Right.
smooth,
Right.
and there's just a uniformity to it. And I would stare at that. I remember just having that thought and just thinking that until like I disappeared,
Uh-huh.
and I was just having like this static. It's hard for me now to have that type of feeling.
Right.
I guess as a kid, there's a
Right.
particular magic in the world. But I remember just those moments,
Mm-hmm.
which like they used to come of themselves back in the day. But now, like I see now, it's that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's realizing just how much you don't know, or just how frail and empty and hollow, your logic
Mm-hmm.
is. You know, and for Paul, it's the same but different in that his the gulf of his awareness between he and I is immeasurable.
Mm-hmm.
For all intents and purposes, he is omniscient,
Mm-hmm.
omnipresent everywhere, which gives him a particular omniscience. His mind is, like I said, he sees all the probable futures and all the probable past and all
Right.
these things taking place, but the breadth of his knowledge is perceptual. He sees,
He's
but he
right.
doesn't know,
No. Mm-hmm.
and he feels that missing place,
Mm-hmm.
like, being unable to grieve for his father.
Mm-hmm.
It's all trapped in these particular
Mm-hmm.
moments, you know, and like I said, this chapter,
Right.
it's speaking to me. Like this thing, like, oh, like it's talking about all these little experiences and
Mm-hmm.
this emptiness that you try to,
Feel.
or you try to, yeah, and try to
Feel.
feel, or you try to ignore because it's deep.
Right.
It feels like infinitely deep, like just this bottomless pit
Mm-hmm.
of of it's like a wafer,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
right?
Okay.
And everything is just so thin.
Thin.
Everything you lay down is like you pave your street with wafers, and right, but you know that at any moment it can just crack, right, and you're falling
Mm-hmm.
because there's that bottomless pit under everything,
Right.
right? But you deceive yourself into feeling that you're on much sturdier ground than
Mm-hmm.
you actually are,
Mm-hmm.
purely because you haven't fallen.
Right.
And you think because you haven't fallen
Falling.
that
Right.
your ground is sturdy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not. Just because you haven't fallen, it's like, road running. You
Yeah.
just haven't looked down.
Right.
There is nothing there.
Correct.
And at particular moments,
Mm-hmm.
you look down and you see, that you are falling,
Right.
that things are falling,
Mm-hmm.
that what you have isn't enough, you know? And that's what he's going through right now. And that's, what I've been through at particular moments of my life.
Hmm.
Like this, it's speaking to me.
Right.
It's speaking to me. So it had me at this moment.
Mhm.
I was feeling something of a kinship here.
You and
So I
Paul,
just
huh?
yeah. So I just want y'all. This is where I am right now. I'm intrigued. I'm in. I'm like, huh? Where's this? Because you got me. You
Right.
got me.
Hmm.
Where you going? Right? And let me continue. Let me see. Where was I? Right here. Night still covered the steel tent within its rock enclosed hideaway. His mother's grief could still be heard. His own lack of grief could still be felt. That hollow place somewhere separated from his mind, which went on in a steady pace, dealing with data, evaluating, computing, submitting answers in something like the Mentat way. And now he saw that he had a wealth of data few such minds ever before had encompassed. But this made the empty place within him no easier to bear. He felt that something must shatter. It was as though a clockwork control for a bomb had been set to ticking within him. It went on about its business no matter what he wanted. It recorded minuscule shadings of difference around him, a slight change in moisture, a fractional fall in temperature, the progress of an insect across that stilted roof, the solemn approach of dawn, and the star-lighted patch of sky he could see out the tent's transparent end. The emptiness was unbearable. Knowing how the clockwork had been set in motion made no difference. He could look to his own past and see the start of it. The training, the sharpening of talents, the refined pressures of sophisticated disciplines, even exposure to the OC Bible at a critical moment. And lastly, the heavy intake of spice. And he could look ahead, excuse me, and he could look ahead, the most terrifying direction, to see where it all pointed. I'm a monster, he thought. A freak. No, he said. Then no, no, no. He found that he was pounding the tent floor with his fists. The implacable part of him recorded this as an interesting emotional data and fed it into computation. Paul! His mother was beside him, holding his hands, his face a gray blob peering at him. Paul, what's wrong? You, he said. I'm here, Paul, she said. It's all right. What have you done to me? He demanded. In a burst of clarity, she sensed some of the roots in the question, said, I gave birth to you. It was, from instinct as much as her own sort of knowledge, the precisely correct answer to calm him. He felt her hands holding him, focused on the dim outline of her face. Certain gene traces in her facial structure were noted in the new way by his own flowing mind, the clues added to other data. In a final summation, answer put forward. Let go of me, he said. She heard the iron in his voice, obeyed. Do you want to tell me what's wrong, Paul? Did you know what you were doing when you trained me? He said. There's no more childhood in his voice, she thought. And she said, I hope the thing any parent hopes, that you would be superior, different. Different? She heard the bitterness in his tone, said, Paul, you didn't want a son, he said. You wanted a Kwisatz Haderach. You wanted a male Bene Gesserit. She recoiled from his bitterness. But Paul, did you ever consult my father in this? She spoke gently out of the freshness of her grief. Whatever you are, Paul, the heredity is as much your father as me. But not the training, he said. Not the things that awakened the sleeper. Sleeper. It's here. He put his hand to his head, then to his breast. In me. It goes on and on and on and on and Paul! She heard the hysteria edging his voice. Listen to me, he said. You wanted the Reverend Mother to hear about my dreams? You listen in her place now. I've just had a waking dream. Do you know why? It was calm yourself, she said. If there's the spice, he said, it's in everything here. The air, the soil, the food, the geriatric spice. It's like the truth sayer drug. It's a poison. She stiffened. His voice lowered and he repeated. A poison. So subtle, so insidious, so irreversible. It won't even kill you unless you stop taking it. We can't leave Arrakis unless we take part of Arrakis with us. The terrifying presence of his voice brooked no dispute. You and the spice, he said. Paul said. The spice changes anyone who gets as much of it. But thanks to you, I could bring that change to consciousness. I didn't get to leave it in the unconscious where the disturbance can be blanked out. I can see it. Paul, I see it, he repeated. She heard madness in his voice. Didn't know what to do. But he spoke again. She heard the iron control return to him. We're trapped here. Trapped here, she agreed. And she accepted the truth of his words. No pressure of the Bene Gesserit, no trickery or artifice could pry them completely free from Arrakis. The spice was addictive. Her body had known the fact long before her mind awakened to it. So here we live out our lives, she thought, on this hell planet. The place is prepared for us if we can evade the Harkonnens, and there's no doubt of my course. A broodmare preserving an important bloodline for the Bene Gesserit plan. Seems like Paul's not the only one that's bitter. But I'll continue. I must tell you about my waking dream, Paul said. Now there was fury in his voice. To be sure you accept what I say, I'll tell you first. I know you will bear a daughter from my sister here on Arrakis. And before I continue,
yeah.
I want to stop right here because this is it.
Right.
This is it now.
Yeah.
Now, me reading this and hearing the terror and the fury in his voice, you know, like I said, I can't empathize with it completely because I'm not omniscient. I don't know everything, and you know that, but I do know enough to hate the knowledge that I've been given. You know,
Yeah,
and
talk about that often.
Yeah, and it makes you bitter to everything around you.
Uh-huh.
Which, like I said, you know, when you're bitter, you know you're doing something wrong. You know, and so he is angry. He's angry at his mother for honing his mind.
Right.
He's angry, you know, that at the Reverend Mothers for, you know, doing this to him, for giving him this sight.
Right.
You know, and you have to understand with this level of awareness, it's like with I don't know if you've ever read the Watchmen comic or watched the Watchmen movie, but there's a particular character in there called Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
Right? Whose awareness rivals that of Paul's. You know, but when you get that type of sight, you know, that's both hindsight and insight. It's just sight. You see everything. You know everything. It is not freedom.
Right.
That is not freedom that you are getting. It is.
It's a weight.
It is the ultimate change.
Yeah.
It is to know where everything goes. It is to know where you go. To know your role in it, and to know how all these things are now dependent upon you and your actions. You see, you know exactly, just like he said, you know, for a lot of people, their personal power, their consciousness, what they get from the spice, quote unquote, is subconscious. They can't see it.
Right.
But for him, he can see
it. Right.
He can more than see it. He can control it. He can hone it. He can call it up when he wants to. You know, other people are unaware of their power. Paul is acutely aware. And in that awareness, he steals power from everyone else. He becomes the thing that moves. He is the man of many paths. He is everywhere and nowhere. He is everyone. He has been robbed of his agency.
Right.
And in doing that, in seeing that, it has robbed everyone else. You know? And just seeing that, you know, how many times have we talked about like the fallacy of leadership? Like
right. That's what this is, right? This is right.
You know, it can't be you because when it is you, this is what happens.
Right.
You know, you are robbed of your agency as you know the part you have to play. And the people, you know, who give you that, they're robbed of their agency.
Right.
Because they're giving it up. And nothing moves. Nothing turns.
Right.
Right? It keeps going. Because this feeling, this loss is a part of the cycle. Like in the last episode.
We talked about that, right?
It runs off a loss. It runs off debt.
Right.
You know, when you are losing, that's when you know you are insuring this cycle.
Right. The loss insures it. Right.
Correct. Every loss, every sacrifice, everything that you give, everything that you take from your giving, all of it contributes to this. There needs to be another base. There needs to be something else. You need to be pulling from something else.
And we know, and I know that the way that we're probably framing it might sound foreign. But if you just look at all of the people, all of the great men and women who we have deemed to be leaders, right? Their thinking, their movements, how they did things, and eventually their debts,
Mm-hmm.
right? It all fed right into what we currently have.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if their their
Sacrifice
sacrifice,
was accounted for.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, even though we
We
have
know it
yet to.
without knowing it.
That's right,
It's ahead
correct.
of us.
Right. It's ahead
We
of
haven't
us.
caught up yet.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what has been our discovery,
Mm-hmm.
throughout this entire process with us, is that we don't want to make that kind of investment because we know that it ensures all the things that we think that is not going to happen, but it always does.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like the first time, I read this
Mm-hmm.
with you, and I even mentioned how I saw a lot of Paul in you. I
Mm-hmm.
even saw Jessica because at the time, you know, I think about just our relationship, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how all of this has come to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the time, and even I'm like, look, this is just it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I wanted. And I knew, that something was going to come of it. I just didn't know what. And so when reading
Mm-hmm.
this particular, chapter, when we read it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, that's what it is. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what it is.
And
So yeah.
so yeah,
Mhm.
this is so I'm at the edge of my seat
Right.
reading this.
And
I've
I'm
been
like,
pulled in.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is exactly what a mother would do. I mean, well, at least, I see it because you even mentioned
Yeah.
how you saw
Yeah. I saw
Jessica with
Jessica.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that this is what it is. This is how we're supposed to go. Your children, well, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
they are supposed to be ahead. And I remember and I've said this so many times, like I used to talk with my grandfather. My grandfather like 50 or something years older than me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how we could talk and we understand each other, have the same and I knew that I didn't want that
Mm-hmm.
for you. I didn't want that for my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to put in place and have to do things to where, it's like sort of like foreign.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been the cost. And I know that there's been, frustration on your end. There's been frustration on my end.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference, like with, well, is that it's not that I didn't care because I do.
Mm-hmm.
I did then, I do now. It's just that I know that this is where it had this is where it has to go. And it's painful. Growth is painful,
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where it had to be. And yes, it's you and it's my daughter, but that's just what it is. And that's
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making any apologies for that. But
Well, yeah, like I said,
so that's just where it
yeah.
is. That's just where it
So
is.
first time
Hmm.
reading this, like I'm sucked in. I'm
Right.
hooked. And now you've got me to that edge, but
Uh-huh.
he's gonna lay it out
Hmm.
exactly what he sees
Hmm.
and exactly what he's going to be.
Hmm.
And
Right.
this is like because I'm like I'm sympathizing, I understand, I'm empathizing.
Hmm.
Now teach me
Right.
what's the lesson here?
What's the
What's the
lesson here?
thing?
Right.
You know.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and it's all coming to a head.
Hmm.
This is the moment now.
Right.
All right. To be sure you accept what I say, I'll tell you first, I know you'll bear a daughter, my sister, here on Ericus. Jessica placed her hands against the tent floor, pressed back against the curving fabric wall to still a pang of fear. She knew her pregnancy could not show yet. Only her own Bene Gesserit training had allowed her to read the first faint signals of her body, to know the embryo only a few weeks old. Only to serve, Jessica whispered, clinging to the Bene Gesserit motto. We only exist to serve. We'll find a home among the freemen, Paul said, where your missionary protectiva has bought us a boat hold. They've prepared a way for us in the desert, Jessica told herself. But how can we know of the missionary protectiva? How could he know of the missionary protectiva? for allowed to explain what the
Yeah.
missionaria protectiva
Protectiva, right. Mm-hmm.
is that I think I might have touched on it a bit earlier, but let me just elucidate it
Mm-hmm.
once more. Is that when Reverend Mothers, they seed planets with myths. It's like especially dangerous planets
Mm-hmm.
where they might find themselves backed into a corner. They see these planets with prophecies and myths
Mm-hmm.
that so if a Reverend Mother ever finds himself in danger, they can play up this myth
Right.
amongst the people
Mm-hmm.
and create a safe space for
Right.
themselves to maneuver
Mm-hmm.
and try to, get out of the situation.
Sounds
So
familiar?
that's what
Right.
the Missionaria Protectiva
Right.
is. It's pretty much this myth building
Right.
type thing that allows for particular people to play particular roles,
Rose. Right.
you know, for their own benefit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. She found it increasingly difficult to subdue her terror at the overpowering strangeness in Paul. He studied the dark shadow of her, seeing her fear in every reaction with his new awareness as though she were outlined in blinding light. A beginning of compassion for her crept over him. The things that can happen here. I cannot begin to tell you, he said. I cannot even begin to tell myself, although I've seen them. This sense of the future, I seem to have no control over it. The thing just happens, the immediate future, say a year. I can see some of that. A road as broad as our Central Avenue on Caladan. Some places I don't see. Shadow places, as though it went behind a hill. And again he thought of the surface of a blowing kerchief. And there are branchings. He fell silent as a memory of that scene filled him. No prescient dream, no experience of his life had quite prepared him for the totality with which the veils had been ripped away to reveal naked time. Recalling the experience, he recognized his own terrible purpose, the pressure of his life spreading outward like an expanding bubble, time retreating before it. Man, Jessica found the tense glow tab control activated. Dim green light drove back the shadows, easing her fear. She looked at Paul's face, his eyes, the inward stare, and she knew where she had seen such a look before, pictured in records of disaster, on the faces of children who experienced starvation or a terrible injury. Their eyes were like pits, mouth a straight line, cheeks indrawn. It's a look of terrible awareness, she thought, of someone forced to their knowledge of his own mortality. He was indeed no longer a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we talk about that often,
But
you
I just
know.
want to go back to when he saw, like I said, his own life expanding like a bubble and time
Mm-hmm.
retreated before it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said that's what happens,
Uh-huh.
right? His own agency becoming the only agency,
Right.
and in doing so, robbing him of all choice.
Right.
When his life has become the life,
Mm-hmm.
his time has become the time. Everything hinges on his actions, and he knows exactly what his actions are,
Right.
and he sees the costs. He knows the things, and he only has one choice now, one pivotal choice. He has to choose between two particular things that
Mm-hmm.
we're going to see later on in this particular chapter. He has to choose now what he's going to be.
That's right. That's right.
His fate is the fate of
That's right.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, in his choice
Mm-hmm.
is the choice.
Mm-hmm.
What is this universe going to be?
Mm-hmm.
What is this imperium going to be? What are we, the people, going to be?
That's right.
He's the culmination. He is all of us.
Mm-hmm.
His choice is the choice. And it's waxing and waning, going
Right.
back and forth in himself. You know, this 15-year-old who is no longer a child,
Right.
whose awareness has stretched, whose understanding of the cost
Mm-hmm.
of this razor edge he's walking on, which is paring down so much,
Mm-hmm.
carving away, into this picture.
Mm-hmm.
And, when a sculptor like him gets his hands on the clay,
Right.
you have to know that every chunk that he takes away are lives.
Right.
Of millions upon millions of lives,
Mm-hmm.
all of them dependent on every brushstroke, on every intention he
Mm-hmm.
feeds into whatever he's creating,
Right.
whatever he's deciding
Mm-hmm.
to be. It's all wrapped up, And I'm like I said before, you say you want a leader.
That's right. You say that's what you
You
want.
say this is what you want. To be dependent upon someone else's brushstrokes, even though you won't depend, you won't, you don't see it as that.
Right.
You see their words as your words. You see their independence as a form of your independence. But there is no independence, not in this relationship.
Right. Now, not when you
This
have
is not,
leaders, right?
yeah, this is not symbiosis. This is
Mm-hmm.
parasitic.
Mm-hmm.
This is one feeding off the other. And it often leads to their death,
Mm-hmm.
to death of both,
Right.
because one cannot exist without the other. There
Sounds
is no
familiar?
independence.
Right. Sounds familiar? I know it
All of it
does.
is
Right.
so contingent,
That's right.
so because no one is taking responsibility, and the people who do is taking all of the responsibility,
Right.
and it's just too
Yep.
much.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Sounds familiar? I know it does.
So allow me to continue
Right.
here. I'm almost done.
Uh,
Ooh, really almost done.
yeah.
Like 2 pages. So this is it. The underlying import of his words began to take over in her mind, pushing all else aside. Paul could see ahead, a way of escape for them. There's no way to evade the Harkonnens, she said. The Harkonnens, he sneered. Put those twisted humans out of your mind.
Yep.
He stared at his mother, studying the lines of her face in the light of the glow tab. The lines betrayed her. She said, you shouldn't refer to people as humans without... Don't be so sure you know where to draw the line, he said. We carry our past with us. And mother mine, there's a thing you don't know and should. We are Harkonnens.
Yeah, yeah,
Just,
yes. That's right.
mm-hmm.
Yep.
This talking about people as if they're not... You can't call them people. They're not
Right.
humans.
Yeah, okay.
I'm making a face right now.
Right. That's both of us like, okay.
This all sounds so familiar.
Sounds familiar. Right.
And we are Harkonnens.
Right.
What?
That's right.
How no? All right.
Okay.
Come on now. Teach me something. Teach me. Her mind did a terrifying thing. It blanked out, as though it needed to shut off all sensations.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul's voice went on at that implacable pace, dragging her with it. When next you find a mirror, study your face. Study mine now. The traces are there if you don't blind yourself. Look at my hands, the set of my bones. If none of this convinces you, then take my word for it. I've walked the future. I've looked at a record. I've seen a place. I have all the data. We're Harkonnens. A renegade branch of the family, she said. That's it, isn't it? Some Harkonnen cousin who... You're the Baron's own daughter, he said, and watched the way she pressed her hands to her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
The Baron sampled many pleasures in his youth, and once permitted himself to be seduced, but it was for the genetic purpose of the Bene Gesserit, by one of you. The way he said you struck her like a slap, but it set her mind to working, and she could not deny his words. So many blank ends of meaning in her past reached out now and linked. The daughter of the Bene Gesserit wanted. It wasn't to end the old Atreides Harkonnen feud, but to fix some genetic factor in their lines. What? She groped for an answer. As though he saw inside her mind, Paul said, they thought they were reaching for me, but I'm not what they expected, and I've arrived before my time, and they don't know it. Jessica pressed her hands to her mouth. Great Mother, he's the Kwisatz Haderach. She felt exposed and naked before him, realizing then that he saw her with eyes from which little could be hidden, and that she knew was the basis of her fear. You're thinking of the Kwisatz Haderach, he said. Put that out of your mind. I'm something unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Let me just stop right here, right
Yeah,
quick.
yeah, right. Just
Just stop right here, right quick.
Yeah.
We're coming to
the
the moment.
right.
But that whole Harkonnen thing,
Yeah.
just like I said, just reminds me so much of black and white people. Black people, and
No.
we don't got nothing to do with them. They're evil. They're the ones.
Yep.
Even referring to them as humans,
Right.
is an insult.
Right. And the Neanderthals.
To what they've done to us. They can't be humans.
Right.
For all the things they've done to, but then you say, no, they are us. Impossible.
Right.
There's no way.
Yeah.
We came first.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We came first. Right.
And it's like,
you don't get it.
You don't get it.
You don't get it.
You're learning. You're going to get it.
Yep.
It's coming up.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And with this whole Kwisatz Haderach thing, being the person in many places at once.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Mentat, but more.
Right.
He's the Kwisatz Haderach, but more.
He's
something unexpected. He came before his time.
That's right.
They knew. This is what Paul knows. This is what Jessica didn't get at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
This is what he's explaining to them. What explained.
Right.
In very few words.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that's needed for someone like Jessica. But the Bene Gesserit, the Reverend Mothers knew that the Atreides line was the line that the Kwisatz Haderach was going to come from.
Right.
And most likely that male from this line
Mm-hmm.
was going to be that.
Right.
But they did not want this Kwisatz Haderach. Not at this time.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But when Jessica, out of love,
Mm-hmm.
gave her Duke
Right.
a son,
Right.
the timetable moved up.
Mm-hmm.
And he was something outside of even their awareness.
Right.
Something comprised of what they believe
Mm-hmm.
and what everyone else believes.
Mm-hmm.
But something more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't limit me with your Kwisatz Haderachs.
Right.
Even though the idea of a Kwisatz Haderach is to be limitless.
Right.
But that is a limitation to what it is that he is seeing. You know, to the thing that he is.
Right. You say that's what you want.
You've been asking for it.
That's right. You've been asking for this.
You've been asking for someone.
That's right.
For someone to answer the call.
Right. Okay.
This is what happens.
That's right.
When it is answered. You get everything you're looking for, plus more.
That's right. Plus more.
You go learn.
Yeah.
You go learn.
Yeah.
And it is a terrible lesson.
It's a terrible lesson. But it's one that, well...
Let me just
finish out, right?
Just finish.
Right. Let's finish out, right?
All right. I must get word out to one of the schools, she thought. The mating index may show what has happened. They won't learn about me until it's too late, he said. She sought to divert him, lowered her hands and said, we'll find a place among the freemen. The freemen have a saying they credit to Shia Halud, Old Father Eternity, he said. They say, be prepared to appreciate what you meet. And he thought, yes, mother mine, among the freemen, you'll acquire the blue eyes and the callus beside your lovely nose from the filter tube to your steel suit, and you'll bear my sister, Saint Aaliyah of the Knife. If you're not the Kwisatz Haderach, Jessica said, what? You couldn't possibly know. He said, you won't believe it until you see it. And he thought, I'm a seed. He suddenly saw how fertile was the ground into which he had fallen. And with this realization, the terrible purpose filled him, creeping through the empty place within, threatening to choke him with grief. He had seen two main branchings along the way ahead. In one, he confronted an evil old baron and said, hello, grandfather. The thought of that path and what lay along it sickened him. The other path held long patches of great obscurity, except for peaks of violence. He had seen a warrior religion there, a fire spreading across the universe with the Atreides green and black banner waving at the head of the fanatic legions drunk on spiced liqueur. Gurney Halleck and a few others of his father's men, a pitiful few, were among them, all marked by the hawk symbol from the shrine of his father's skull. I can't go that way, he muttered. That's what the old witches of your school really want. I don't understand you, Paul, his mother said. This is it.
This the moment right here. Right here.
I need you to listen now. He remained silent, thinking like the seed he was, thinking with the race consciousness he had first experienced as terrible purpose. He found that he no longer could hate the Bene Gesserit, or the Emperor, or even the Harkonnens. They were all caught up in the need of their race to renew its scattered inheritance, to cross and mingle and infuse their bloodlines in a great new pooling of genes. And the race knew only one sure way for this, the ancient way, the tried and certain way that rode over everything in its path. Jihad. Surely I cannot choose that way, he thought. But he saw again in his mind's eye the shrine of his father's skull and the violence with the green and black banner waving in its midst. Jessica cleared her throat, worried by his silence. Then, the Freeman men will give her sanctuary? He looked up, staring across the green-lighted tent at the inbred patrician lines on her face. Yes, he said. That's one of the ways, he nodded. Yes, they'll call me Muad'Dib, the one who points the way. Yes, that's what they'll call me. He closed his eyes, thinking, now, my father, I can mourn you. And he felt the tears coursing down his cheeks. You can't see right now, but I am smiling. Let me just go back to this thing right here. This thing right here.
Right.
This one paragraph. He remained silent, thinking like the seed he was, thinking with the race consciousness he had first experienced as terrible purpose. He found that he no longer could hate the Bene Gesserit or the Emperor, even Harkonnens. They were all caught up in the need of their race to renew its scattered inheritance, to cross and mingle and infuse their bloodlines in a great new pooling of genes, and the race knew only one sure way for this, the ancient way, the tried and certain way that rode over everything in its path. Jihad.
Uh-huh.
If
I know
you,
that sounds familiar. Come on.
if you don't understand what's being said,
Uh-huh.
then allow me to explain.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a particular awareness of the people around you, of the people that you are a part of who you are,
Mm-hmm.
you find yourself incapable of hate. I remember I told you this at one point,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think I can really hate white people anymore. I don't think I can really hate us.
Mm-hmm.
I can get angry.
Yeah.
I can get close.
Right. Right.
Right, but I don't think I can ever hate us.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that we have read about, us.
Right.
Right? I remember, just being when I was younger and feeling like something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There's something broken
Right.
about this world,
Mm-hmm.
about what it does to us.
Mm-hmm.
I remember bringing this to you,
Right.
and I remember, first becoming aware of being black,
Mm-hmm.
of the impact that my race is having on my life and my experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading, Malafia Sante,
Mm-hmm.
and what's the other guy?
It was Malafia Sante, Bruce Jans,
And Chinua
It should
Achebe.
be.
Learning about all the things, that were a part
Mm-hmm.
of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling disappointed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you learn about race, when you learn about us,
Mm-hmm.
and you learn about white people, you write them off because you know exactly what they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're evil.
Mm-hmm.
They're the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who have caused all this. It's their fault. My pain is their fault. Right? So you look inward to try to understand what it means to be black. And it's nothing but the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Kings and queens and empires and wars and suffering, conquerors. I look at Africa now and all I see is ruins.
Mm-hmm.
And the people so caught up in trying to be what they were. And instead of trying to answer the call of what they ought to be now.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And I see that everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone trying to live up to some malformed past that we have created. Everyone trying to be something that they're not. Everybody's lying.
Right.
Everyone's lying.
Instead of answering the call of who you need to be today, like now.
Yeah, and
right.
You think, why are they lying?
Right.
Why are they lying?
Right.
And this is when it all disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
This is when, like I said, I felt the rush of understanding, and it all coalesced. See, because we all want to live. We all want to exist, but there is only one way we know how to exist with each other and with everything around us. At odds, at war.
That's right.
We succeed in spite of. We live in spite of the fires and the storms and the predators, in spite of the rich and the poor and the kings and the peasants, in spite of what we know and what we don't, in spite of space and all the stars and the darkness between them, in spite of chaos and order, we live to spite the world around us. Because we cannot justify our existence. Our life is conflict. Our existence is eternal conflict. What is eternal conflict? Jihad, the unending war. That is all we know. That is the only metric in which we have possibly
measured ourselves.
It's the only way we know how to exist. That's why we're here. That's why we keep coming back here, because all of our answers, all of our things come from this spite, this eternal conflict with ourselves and everything around us. It's all we know. Black, white, and all the colors in between. It is all we know. Life is conflict. It is war. It is jihad. And when you ask for a leader, when you're asking for someone to take up the reins, to take up the flag, what you're asking for is someone to end this war,
That's right.
to answer the call, to finish the conflict,
Mm-hmm.
which at its core is unending. It is our core.
That's right.
It
You
is how we
can't.
have
They've
built
built
everything.
everything. Right.
So when someone takes up that position, they are incapable of ending.
Mm-hmm.
It is who we are. The only way this
That's right.
ends, the only way this
Mm-hmm.
ends is when every individual, everyone
Mm-hmm.
ends it.
That's right.
Is when we stop. No one can stop that for you. But you don't know how to stop.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how to stop. So it is now Paul's responsibility.
Right.
And Paul's responsibility. And everyone who comes after Paul,
Mm-hmm.
it is the Atreides' responsibility now
Mm-hmm.
to teach you how to stop. And like I said, it is a lesson that can be taught but never learned.
Mm-hmm.
Or learned
but
never
never
taught.
taught. Right.
You can only learn it.
Mm-hmm. But you can't
But you
teach
can't
it.
teach it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can teach it, but they'll never learn.
Oh, I mean, like
So
how many
here we
times,
are.
right? So here we are.
Here
Right.
we are.
All right.
And now this
This is
is
it.
the terrible purpose.
Mm-hmm.
This is the bottomless pit.
Right.
This is the one thing where all of it snapped into focus.
Mm-hmm.
This is the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Paul had two choices. We're going to see what he didn't choose in a later book.
Right.
What he
Mm-hmm.
didn't choose, confronting his grandfather, becoming something else.
Right.
He chose jihad. He's choosing
Right.
this particular lesson. He's choosing to take up the flag of the freemen, to create this religious warrior class of people built upon this hatred,
Mm-hmm.
this anger, this angst that we're all having, that we build from.
Mm-hmm.
The very core of our society is this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And he was born of that.
Right.
Born of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
All of us, suffering, winning, and losing. He is all parties, all parts. And he knows now what he must do.
Mm-hmm.
He must give direction to this terrible jihad
Mm-hmm.
to see us through it. He must create it and he must end it.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me.
Oh yeah.
When it's not you.
That's right.
When they will call me what I did.
Mm-hmm.
The one who points the way. I'll be your prophet. I will be the one. I'll be exactly what you're looking for. And I'll be everything that you're not.
That's right.
Because that's the cost of perception. When you understand things that you're dealing with, you can't hate.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just so familiar. It's all just the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And we keep saying it, right? We keep coming back to, and we keep saying that, and yet it's always the thing, like.
But they do this.
But they do
right.
That,
and they're doing this,
mm-hmm.
and they're doing that. Jihad.
Mm-hmm.
It will never end. It will never end until that this is the option
mm-hmm.
that we are confronted with.
Right.
Those who know,
mm-hmm.
we're confronted with the Paul path. Because when you know the cost, you can resign yourself to pay it.
Yeah.
And with or without you, it will be paid. And you can give everyone that outlet they've been looking for. Drown them in blood until they become sick of it.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully. Create it and end it. You can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But
that
is jihad.
Yes.
That is war in its most external, in its most prevalent. It's right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right now we're all fighting this secret war.
Mm-hmm.
This war of perception.
Right.
This perceptual battle that has always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But you can be a Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Paul has no other choice.
Right.
That's the only path that a leader can take.
Mm-hmm.
A true leader. That's the only path they can take.
Yes.
To give you and them exactly what you say you want, and you'll hate them for it.
Yep.
You'll hate them, but it's what you want.
Yep. That's what you said.
That's what you said.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another way, and it's the way that we've been talking about this entire time.
Yeah, for like, I don't know, 25 episodes. The first 25 episodes or so, 24, 25 episodes.
You.
Yeah.
Just stop.
How many times do I have to say this? I keep saying, I'm like, stop.
And that was the thing.
Yep.
That was welling up inside of him. That was that hole that has finally been filled. His terrible purpose, his race consciousness, this compulsion, this calling that he never understood, not until now. Now he gets it. Everybody's been trying to create, trying to build and destroy, not understanding the pattern.
Right.
This cycle we found ourselves in.
Yeah. That form and function, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that extensively.
All the things that are feeding into it, you don't see.
Right.
You are ignoring it.
Right.
At best. Or you just don't see it.
Or you see it, or maybe you can see it in others, but you cannot recognize it in yourself. Right.
Either way, we all got our blinders up. Some way, somehow. You want freedom? Fine.
Right.
Then that means you have to get to heaven, you have to pass through hell. You're going to have to pass through the gates. You're going to have to suffer. And you know what you're going to have to do after you're done suffering? Suffer some more.
That's right. I was about to say suffer some more. Yeah, suffer.
You are going to have to learn. The same way you learned this lesson. Through uncounted millennia of running from tigers and shielding yourself from the storm that has put this in your blood, that you have to defeat the world around you. You're going to suffer under that knowledge for who knows how long, for more uncounted millennia, until you learn. And only you can take that action. Right now, we ain't learning.
Yeah.
This is madness, like I said. This is pointless. But you think someone... All right.
Yep.
I'll give it a point.
That's right.
And that's the best they could possibly do, is give your suffering a point.
Right.
And hope that you learn.
Right.
That's all Paul can do. And he's chosen.
You want it, you got it. You're going
to get everything.
That's right.
The Muad'Dib has been born. He who points the way.
That's right.
The Kwisatz Haderach. You know, the Duke Mentat. Everything.
All that good stuff.
You're going to get it.
Right. You want that leader to emerge. You know, to show you what. Anyway. Okay.
All right.
You're going to get it all. You are going to get it all.
So yeah.
So yes.
And we could talk about this ad nauseum.
Right.
You know, this could be its own episode, just discussing what we just read. Right. But in conclusion, you know, our world asks so many compromises of us, tells us to ignore, to just keep going. You know, like I said many times before, built by killers, preserved by liars. You kill and lie all the time. That's all this world is. You want someone to take that away from you, right? When the best that they can do is give the killing and lying a point.
Right.
A point of maybe we can learn to not kill and lie, but it can't be taught. Because it's taught through killing and lying.
Lying, correct.
You have to be able to understand, but you won't. You won't. Because you want for there to be a point.
That's right.
The point is, this is pointless, but you won't accept it.
So
because
it has to be something.
So much.
That's right. You've given so much, it has to be
guess
something.
What?
Right.
You will continue down this pointless path until you finally accept what you have already known. Until you catch up to your knowledge, you will suffer. And there is nothing, not a leader, not a God, not an act of providence.
Right.
There's no aliens, no storm, no nothing is going to come that is going to take that away
from you. That's right.
You have to face it in your own time. You have to. And until you do, get used to this pain. Get used to that black hole and get used to falling, because that's all you ever will do. Welcome to the Isle of the Real People.
That's right.
Welcome to the Jihad. We've been waiting.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments, And thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you.